Apologies, I couldn't be there in person. But I hope you'll find the presentation on Ireland to be somewhat informative. I'm going to start by just introducing the IWMA very briefly. I'll talk a bit about how we collect municipal waste in Ireland. I'll talk about the infrastructure that we have developed. We are very focused on increasing our recycling rates, so I'll talk about that, and I'm sure that's just as important in Estonia. We have introduced contamination detection systems, which I think you'll find interesting. And we have benchmarked Ireland against the best recycling countries in Europe. So I'll run through each of those. Very briefly, the IWMA, the Trade Association for Waste Management Companies in Ireland, we have about 70 member companies. About 25 of those collect household waste, and that makes up about 95% of the market. We employ 8,500 people. We manage 11.4 million tonnes of waste each year. And we've developed about 200 waste management facilities in Ireland. So Ireland is we've 5 million population, so we're, 3 to 4 times the size of Estonia. So that's the profile of our association and what we do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we collect municipal waste in Ireland. We're quite unique, I suppose. We have a fully privatized market, and what we operate in what we call a side-by-side competition. So companies compete directly against each other for customers, and that does lead to several companies driving the same roads to collect waste. But on average, that's about, we've worked it out as about 2.8 companies per house in the country. So it's not like we have 5 companies driving down the same streets. We have 2, we have 3 generally, sometimes we have more. So we think it provides excellent value. The prices are very competitive and they're lower than they were 20 years ago. And who can say that in any other utility in Europe? We have a very efficient service. We compete on the service as well as the price. And we, the customers get a lot of attention from our members as opposed to just being a number whose bin is collected. They're treated as customers. We have incentivized charging, which encourages prevention and recycling. And that's becoming more incentivized now under new rules that are coming in that we have agreed to. And there's been significant technology investment in Ireland. And I'll go through that to some extent as I go through the talk. So we believe the customers in the environment benefit from the competitive marketplace. So it is unique, but we think it's operating better than really anywhere else is our view. We have a 3-bin system. Unfortunately, the colours don't match across the country because they've evolved as opposed to being imposed. But we have 3 bins. We have a dry recycling bin, and that will take paper, metal, and all plastic packaging. We don't collect glass in the recycling bin. That will go to bottle banks. We have a lot of bottle banks. We have the organic or the compost bin, which in Ireland is always brown. Actually, it's the one consistent colour we have because it came a bit later. So we have that rolled out across the whole country. And we have the residual bin or the general waste bin for the non-recyclable materials. That's often black, but it can be any colour. So that's not consistent. But the 3-bin system is consistent, and it's an easy message for everybody. And look, even though the colours are different, everybody knows what bin is for what in their own garden. When the bins are out in their garden, they know which bin is for which. So it doesn't really matter that the neighbour might have different colours. Okay, so we have a very innovative waste collection service because we're always competing, and bringing in new innovation is attractive to companies that are competing. So in Ireland, every bin lift is weighed, which is unique probably. So we have very good data, and we can use that data. Customers are informed monthly of the weights that are collected in each bin. And that's going to become, there's more information going to be provided actually under the new rules that are coming in, where we will have to tell the customers what their individual recycling rate is every month and how it's improving and how it compares with others in their area and that. So we're delighted to do that. That's going to be really helpful in encouraging more recycling. We have good communications with customers via text messages and emails. In other countries, you're trying to talk to the public nationally or locally. In Ireland, we talk to the public directly to each individual customer. We have multi-compartmental vehicles in some rural areas. I just had a picture of that 2 slides earlier. If you can see, this is an interesting one here where we collected all 3 bins in the one truck. So there's it's a split vehicle for the recyclables and the residual waste. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the food waste going in. It's not a large bin, they're small caddies, but the food waste goes in there and it gets sucked up to the front. There's a pod at the front of the truck. So we can, in rural areas, and Ireland has a 36% rural population, which is very high. We have a lot of houses in rural areas, and we can use these specialized trucks that we've developed ourselves in Ireland to collect in those areas to reduce the number of trucks going to those rural areas. So that works well. We have a camera detection system, which I will talk about. So you'll see some slides on that. We have bin washing in some areas, and the latest thing is we have e-bike collections just coming into Dublin City for commercial waste. And the reason we're doing that, the council in Dublin, the county council, want the bags off the streets. So for commercial premises, they just put the bags out on the streets at the end of the day. The council wants to get rid of that. So we're putting in centralized collection points with compactors, with pay-to-use compactors, where you need a smart card to access the compactor. But it might be 200-300 meters away for the commercial premises for some of them. So we're offering this. Panda, certainly one of our big members, is offering this bike service where they can take the bins from the shop or from the commercial premises and bring it to the collection point for a small fee. But that would be very popular, I'm sure. The municipalities are involved to some extent just in the provision of the civic amenity sites. Now, some of these, are private as well. There's 132 in Ireland. There's a certain number of them are private, but quite a lot of them are run by the local authorities. We also have the bring banks, which are generally bottles, glass bottles, sometimes aluminium cans, but we have a DRS now, so that's not really needed. And we have the textile banks. And there's 1,740 of those spread throughout the country. And then we have the recycling, the waste electrical and the batteries. And that's generally coming back through take-back schemes at electrical stores. So we want to see more use of that, to be honest, because we're still getting electrical items in our bins and we're getting batteries, and we have problems from battery fires, as I'm sure every country in Europe does right now. So that's the collection. Just moving on to the infrastructure, all private infrastructure, almost exclusively private sector infrastructure. We have more than 100 transfer stations developed by private companies. Every company will have its own, or 2 or 3, or some of them have 10 or 12 spread throughout the country, come in all shapes and sizes. But they're operated to a high standard and they're highly regulated by the EPA. EPA are very, very tough and strict. So the environmental performance is very good in these transfer stations. We also have the material recovery facilities where we sort the dry recyclables. We have 11 of those in total, including a couple that are dealing with commercial dry recyclables, and there's about 8 dealing with the domestic, the household dry recyclables, spread throughout the country, different operated, generally run by companies that collect waste as well, but not every company has a MRF. We have biological treatment facilities, about 24 in total. The one on the left there is really a flagship one in Dublin, Hunstown Biogas Plant, 100,000 tonnes per annum. There's one in Cork that's going to be very similar to that hasn't been built yet, but is on the way. And we have a lot of composting plants, and they vary in size from, they're generally sort of 20,000 to 60,000 tonnes each. A lot of them are taking the source segregated waste from the brown bin system that we have, but we do also have a form of MBT, for those of you who are familiar with that. Some of those are taking residual waste and biologically treating it or bio-drying it in order to separate it into different fractions and to recycle some materials, some plastics and some metals, which I'll show you later, and also to make a better quality fuel for solid recovered fuel for incineration, or RDF for export. We do export about 300,000 tonnes. We don't have full capacity in Ireland. We're trying to get there, but we're a long time trying to get a third incinerator. It's been in the process for 25 years, so we have a problem with that. But we do export to some incinerators abroad. We used to come to the one in Tallinn, actually. I don't think we do these days, but we send a lot to Scandinavia in particular. We have two incinerators ourselves. The one on the left is the Dublin plant, which is 690,000 tonnes. And the top right is the one in Meath, which is not that far from Dublin, 230,000 tonnes. Dublin did have some, Dublin City Council involvement initially, but it's really very privatized now. Dublin City Council still makes some money out of it. They share the profits, but it's run privately. The bottom right then is the SRF. So we produce a solid recovered fuel, and we have 4 cement kilns in Ireland that are burning that. And that's been very good at dealing with residual waste as well. We have 3 landfills. We used to have 120 back in about 1990. We've only 3 now. They're all private sector. The one on the left is due to close next February. It's full. And the 2 on the right will keep going because they've got extensions and they're run to a very high standard. As you can see from the photos, they're very highly engineered, and the biogas collected, the methane collected and used to generate electricity. We have some plastics reprocessing, not as much as we'd like, but we have 2 plants at the moment, and we'd like to have more because really you want to be trading in pellets and flakes, not in waste if you can. So Ireland is developing further along that road. These are very modern plants, well engineered. So just on the reprocessing, we reprocess glass just over the border in Northern Ireland, and we reprocess some wood in the south of Ireland. But a lot of our paper has to be exported. We don't have any paper mills. We're too small a country, so we export paper. We export quite a lot of other recyclables as well: aluminium, steel cans, all of that. Okay, so it's been really important for us as a private sector waste industry to increase recycling rates, because we're at the coalface. So there is a responsibility on us to do a lot here. So we're at about 41% in Ireland, and we put together a task force with all our main big and small companies, and we've been working on it for 2.5 years to see what we can do to increase recycling rates. And this should be interesting because it's, we've looked at Europe as well and what other people do. So I think this is of interest to everybody, hopefully. The main focus for us now, we've looked at a wide range of things now. We've looked at about 20 different things, and these are the 4 things we think can make a difference right now. One of them is unique to Ireland. Is the first one is the classification of skip and compactor waste. A lot of waste in Ireland has been called MSW. That's not MSW, and we've discovered that through this exercise. So we're trying to fix that. I'll show you in a moment. The rollout of the organic bins is really important to get people to use the brown bin, the composted organic bin. That's really important. Capturing recyclables from residual waste, we're doing it. It's not a hugely important thing, but it's something we have to do because we're losing those recyclables. And then we're encouraging better segregation from the public. I mean, you'll see that from the contamination detection system. So in Ireland, and this may not be relevant for Estonia, so I won't dwell on it, but we found that 80% of our bulky MSW, which was classified as 200307, is actually mixed C and D waste. And it's been misclassified for many years. It's not municipal waste at all because it's under the Eurostat definition. If it was coming from a house, we said, it must be municipal waste. It's not if it's works at a house. If it's works, DIY, extension, anything, it's not MSW. So that's been dragging down our recycling rate. So we think if we get that right, and there's also some compactors that are getting industrial manufacturing waste, the material that doesn't qualify as MSW, and again a lot of that is residual waste, and all that's dragging our recycling rate down. So we think our recycling rate is actually about 7% higher than the 41. We think we're at about 48, but it's not being measured correctly, and that's been our fault. We're not blaming the EPA, but we're working with the EPA to try and rectify it. So that's number one, and it's be a big impact on Ireland. But the further rollout of organic bins is relevant everywhere, I think, across Europe. And what way we're trying to do it is to provide these kitchen caddies. Recycling starts in the kitchen. It doesn't start at the bin out in the street. It starts in the kitchen. So if people segregate in their kitchens, they will then put the right waste in the right bins outside. And we think this really helps, that we try to get people to start to use these bins. So we provide some compostable liners free of charge, and these kitchen caddies that are quite small. They're I don't know, they're 15 litre, I can't remember, 10 litre kitchen caddies, but 10 litre, 8 to 10 litre actually, 7 to 10 litre. Capturing recyclables. So look, it is possible. It's not ideal, but metals, you can see it on the top. The metals, they're a bit dirty, but at the end of the day, dirty metals will still be recycled. The plastic film looks a bit cleaner there. The HDPE plastic looks clean enough. The PET there doesn't look too bad. And then we produce the SRF and the RDF that I mentioned. So a lot of the MBT processes we have are to make SRF and to make RDF. But while we're doing that, we will capture as many recyclables as we can. So we're not putting great faith in this as being a game changer, but we might get a couple of percentage points out of it. Now, this is a game changer, we believe, the contamination detection systems. This is the problem. You can see on the left-hand side, this is the EPA analysis of our waste in 2022. So 59% in the general waste bin, which fits with the fact that we have a 41% recycling rate, although this isn't the full picture, but it just happens to match. And then you can see the dry recycling and the organics making up the recycling rate of 41%. But on the right-hand side, the EPA have said from their analysis, this is where that waste should have gone. And you can see that 82% of it could have been recycled if it was all perfectly sorted. Now, the public will never perfectly sort, so we know we're never going to get to 82% recycling. That's just theoretical. But if we could get halfway there, that would get us to 62%. If we could get a quarter way there, that would get us to 52%. So we think there's at least 10% can be got out of encouraging better segregation by the public at source. So this is the sort of contamination. Now, these are extreme pictures. This isn't typical, but these are pictures that were sent to me that are extreme examples of people contaminating recycling bins. Dirty nappies, food waste, brick. So sorry. So there's clearly work to be done there. We also have recyclables in the residual waste bins. You can see there's a lot of cardboard, there's a lot of plastic, sometimes there's glass bottles, there's a lot of things in there, and there's often garden waste and food waste, a lot of things in there that could be recycled. And the point of this is to encourage people not to put it in the residual bin. So it's not all about reducing contamination. It's actually about encouraging people to place things in the recycling bins if they're recyclable. So it's been introduced. Panda have been the leader on this. So you have a lot of slides of Panda. They're our biggest member. They have about 20% of the market. But they're very innovative, and they're the ones that have been leading on this. But others are going to follow, and it will have some backing hopefully from our packaging producer scheme. Repack is going to help with some trials. And we want to get this rolled out across the whole country. So we start off in a good position in that every bin in Ireland has a radio frequency ID chip. This has been mandatory since 2015. So we know our customers through the chips in the bins. When we get their waste, we know it's their waste. We know it's not their neighbour's waste. We know it's their waste. So that's quite unique, and it helps us with this. We then put the cameras in the back of the trucks. So the camera there is on the top, looking down at the waste as it's tipped into the truck, and there's a light comes on at the same time, looking in at the hopper so they can see the waste as it's tipped. And then that's stored. You can see on the left, we read the tag so we know whose bin it is, really important. And then we store the data. So it's not a real-time event, it's stored and it's looked at later. So when it's looked at later, somebody sits down, and this is humans, it could be AI. We prefer humans right now because we're just afraid that, AI, we don't want to get in the wrong side of our customers. We want the customers to buy into this. So we want to make sure what's been sent to them is perfectly correct and is not going to annoy them. So on the left-hand side, the example we had there was a glass bottle. This is in the recycling bins. So we don't take glass in the recycling bins. So the advice there is please bring glass bottles to the bottle bank. So this is a feedback tool. We're not using it to charge people more. That could happen. It has happened in the past, but it's been sold now as a feedback tool, so as we'll get better segregated waste, so as we'll increase our recycling rates. On the right-hand side, you can see canvas sack goes into the waste bin. Plastic bags should be loose and empty. You can see that plastic bag has very good recyclables in it, but we're not going to access them very easily if it's tied up in a plastic bag. So try to encourage people to put the waste in, the recyclables in clean, dry, and loose. We also looking at the residual waste bins, and we're looking at the compost, the brown bins, the bio waste bins as well. But there's more to be got out of this bin. You won't see all the waste in this bin because it's in black plastic bags and it's not something we can tell people they can't do. So we just have to see what we can see. And you can see on the left-hand side, leaves, grass, and weeds go to compost bin. So there are a lot of people not using the brown bin, and they're putting their leaves and their grass and everything into the residual bin. That's illegal, so they're not allowed to do that. So we advise them not to do that and to put it in. And it might encourage people to start using a brown bin that they've had and haven't been using. On the right-hand side, you can see there's food waste. You can see there's cardboard boxes. So we're telling them where that stuff will go. And this will be good for spotting electrical items as well, and maybe preventing some of those fires that we're all getting from the batteries. So you can see from this slide that there are a lot of recyclables, even in these plastic bags that you can see through. You can see there's packaging. We take all plastic packaging. There's some plastic box there on the right-hand side. There's some plastic box there, and foil, and this is a PET bottle. So there's all sorts of things we will see, and we'll advise people on where that should go. So this is the results of a trial that was done by Panda in 2017 to 2019, a 2-year trial. You might be able to read the text, but I can tell you what it says. On the left-hand side is the starting point. This is the number of bins that were contaminated, and it's 50% roughly, between up to 55% of bins were contaminated at the start of the trial. And you can see that dropped right down to about 10% within August to December, about 4 months. And then after that, it dropped further. And we were well into the trial, and about 18 months into the trial, it was really down at about 5%. So 5% of bins had contamination. 95% of the recycling bins had zero contamination by the end of the trial. So that was a fantastic result. And that's why Panda are rolling it out to all their customers, which is 20% of the market. And if others all follow, which I know they are, I know 4 or 5 other big companies are going to do the same. They're going to do the trials first, and hopefully they will roll it out, and we get coverage of, maybe most of the market will have coverage with this system. And that's all private money. There's a little bit of support we're looking for from Repack. Ideally, we'd like to see actually the packaging producers pay for this, and maybe in Estonia, that's something that could happen if you go down this road. The packaging producers have a big obligation to support the collection of packaging waste, and they certainly could do more in Ireland. They're at the low end of the scale. I know they're doing a bit better in Estonia. We're also providing educational videos. The only difference here, everybody does this, I suppose, but what we're doing differently is we'll be sending those videos, short little videos, directly to our customers through the relationship we have with them, through the communications tools, that we have directly with them. So that might make a difference. We'll keep them short and snappy, but try to give them confidence of the fact that their waste is being treated very well. So it's worth their while source segregating, because it's going to help with the recycling rate and with the quality of the recyclables. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is a benchmarking project that we took on board. When we started this recycling task force, we wanted to know what the best performing countries were doing. And we hired Eunomia to do this, because Eunomia have done a lot of work for Eurostat, and they're very familiar with the data and how it works and how it should be done. So we engaged Eunomia. This is November 2023, so it's nearly 2 years ago now when they finished the report. So that'll tell you we're at this a little while. So they were to review the new methodology that the EU has come out with for measuring recycling. And then they were to analyze Ireland versus everybody else. So without reading through the slide, they basically had to adjust. They had to look at how things were being measured in each of the top countries, and were they being measured correctly. And if not, they would adjust the results, and then they would see what they're doing differently to Ireland. And I think that was well worth doing. So this is the starting point. We looked at the recycling rates in 2020. You could see Ireland was about 40%, 41% there. In the middle, I see Estonia is over here it was just under 30% at that time. I think it's 33% now. But we weren't interested in looking at the average countries. We were interested in looking at the best performers. So while we're benchmarking, we're only benchmarking against the best. We're not benchmarking against everybody. So we're never going to look like the best when we do this benchmarking. So we took from Belgium up. All these countries were over 50%. And we said, well, let's see what they're doing. Now, some of them are not part of the EU, like Wales, for example, and Northern Ireland. The UK countries are not part of the EU now. So we did look at Wales, because they're claiming, high 50s, 56%, something like that. So that was it. Germany, Austria, Slovenia, Netherlands, Wales, Belgium, and Italy. We tried to look at Switzerland, but you know me, I struggled to get data on Switzerland, so we just left it out. And it wouldn't necessarily be that consistent with the EU either. I'm not going to read through this slide, but the two main points here, the slides will be available. You can look at this if you're really interested. But the main issues really are, we need to include commercial waste that is similar to household waste. And that's not been done in a lot of countries. They're only looking at the waste collected by the municipalities. The second thing is the contamination and where you measure and trying to take the contamination out of the recycling. So that's the second main thing. And the other thing is to do with codes and stuff, things that should be included and things that shouldn't be included, such as DIY at a household is not household waste. It's commercial, it's C&D waste. So they're the kind of things that you know me looked at, and they have good expertise in this area. So when they did the adjustments, Germany came down 10 points. So Germany, which was near 70%, was now under 60%. Austria came down about 4 points from about 62. Slovenia down 9 points. Netherlands down nearly 7. Wales down 14. So the Welsh were including rubble collected at civic community sites as being municipal waste, and it's clearly not municipal waste. If it's recycled, it's C&D recycled waste. Belgium came down 2.5%, Italy a small bit, and Ireland a small bit. The EPA in Ireland are very, very strict on how they do everything, and they're very much by the book. And we've been including commercial and industrial waste for 20, 30 years now. So we didn't have that adjustment that a lot of them had. So this is the end result, I suppose. This table, I think, sums up what we found with those countries. So when you adjust the recycling rates, okay, Ireland is still at about 40, but when we talk about the reclassification work that we're doing, Ireland, we think is actually in the high 40s. So it should be higher up there. But sorry, the graph's on the right-hand side. So Ireland is probably up in the high 40s on this, which is not far behind most of them. Germany has come down. So they're coming down from near 70 down to 56.7. Wales has come down to 51 from... Wales was up in the 60s, I think, and it's down to 51. Austria is still quite high, 58.6, but I did further work in Austria, which I will show you just now. Belgium is about 50, just under 50, 49, Netherlands 50, Slovenia 50, Italy 50. So, you know, a lot of those top performing countries are at about 50, and some of them are high 50s. But I still don't believe Austria is at 58.6, and I'll explain why. But the interesting thing is the residual waste, the gray bar here. So this is on the scale on the left-hand side, residual waste per capita. So Ireland is just under 400. So we're similar to Belgium and the Netherlands. Austria is a bit better on that. But again, I'll talk a bit about Austria. Wales is higher on that. Slovenia and Italy are quite low on residual waste per capita. But this is a metric that I've suggested to Eurostat they should be using, because it tells you about waste prevention as well as recycling. Whereas if you're just looking at recycling, a lot of the top recycling countries are collecting more waste for recycling when they don't have to. Like garden waste is an example. They collect an awful lot of garden waste. We don't do that because the carbon emissions are higher. Now, there's a lot of data here. I'm not going to go through it, but this is my comparison of Ireland and Austria. And, you know, we're at 41, reported 41%. They reported 62%. We believe that's a lot lower than 62%. What happened in Austria is they had, in 2019, they had 5.5 million tons. They brought in commercial waste and they went to 7.7 million tons. Now, normally when you bring in commercial waste, your recycling rate goes down because it's very hard to get high recycling rates for commercial waste. And I'm not talking about cardboards from here and there. I'm talking about the whole of commercial waste, which is very often a poorly sorted waste stream because you don't have the individual responsibility that you have with household waste. So they had 75% of the new waste was recycled. And I found that very hard to believe. And the data is there if you want to look at it later, but I'll just show you the summary points that I've made here on the next slide. So Austria recycles in terms of waste metals. So they brought in an awful lot more waste metals, waste wood, and waste paper, as well as bio waste. And I believe them on the bio waste. I'm not arguing with that. And there's a lot of garden waste. That's fine. But these materials, I don't believe are all MSW. And that's where I'm coming from here. So Austria recycles 2.68 times more MSW metals than Ireland produces. MSW metals are usually cans, metal cans, but they're including huge amounts of scrap metal here. And I would have to ask, does that include ELVs, end-of-life vehicles, because they're not municipal waste? Or does it include a lot of construction and demolition metals? It has to, because you can't have 3 times as many metals in MSW in Austria as you do in Ireland. So I would question that figure. The waste wood, the same, 3.55 times more waste wood. So they recycle 3.5 times more waste wood than we produce in Ireland. Okay, so that just makes absolutely no sense. And I'm saying, is it offcuts from sawmills? Is it construction wood, like demolition wood? What is it? Are they knocking down houses, wooden houses, and calling it MSW? So there's some serious questions to be answered there. Waste paper, not as big an anomaly, but 1.2 times more waste paper than we produce. So they recycle. But their recycling rate, if it's at 70%, 75%, which is what they claim for packaging, and Austria's packaging is quite low, actually. So this is non-packaging stuff. Then, Austria produces 61% more waste paper than Ireland. Why 61% more waste paper? That doesn't make any sense. So there's some non-MSW data being included in the Austrian data that's driving up the recycling rate. So I suspect they're in the low 50s, not the high 50s. In terms of packaging waste, that made up just 20% of Austria's MSW, whereas in Ireland it was 38%. Again, that suggests high levels of non-MSW in the Austrian data. So you need to be aware of the statistics. And another statistic that I'm struggling with is, Eurostat statistics need to be audited. That's the reality. Ireland produces twice as much plastic packaging than the average of everybody else. That sticks out there on that graph like a sore thumb. That's plastic packaging generated per capita. And Ireland is at 66 kilos and everyone else is 40 and below, or one of them is at 50. But Estonia there at somewhere in the 30s, so we have twice as much plastic packaging as Estonia. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's the way the EPA is measuring it. It's the way it's been reported to Eurostat. And it's the way that Eurostat doesn't audit this properly. And I think the EU needs to spend several million euro auditing this data from all these countries, because it actually is. This data has now been used for the plastic owned resources tax, and we're paying 200 million a year in that tax because we have so much plastic packaging. So I think that's just need to be careful with Eurostat data. There are a lot of problems with it. Very briefly, final slide. Austria's data is just not credible. I've said that. Other countries are also misreporting recycling data. You can see that from the Eunomia work. No country is achieving more than 60% recycling rate despite the reported data. I'd say the best are in the mid-50s, which is a question, how do we all get to 65 if the best is in the mid-50s? Ireland's packaging waste recycling in general is comparable with the best performers. We have quite a good packaging. We're at 67% packaging waste recycling. So the main differences are garden waste and the measurement of non-packaging materials, particularly metals, wood, and paper when it comes to Austria. Ireland can increase MSW recycling rates by focusing on these few things. I've mentioned them already, so I won't dwell on them. The fixing the errors and the C&D versus bulky MSW, extending the bio-waste collections, relevant for everybody, rolling out the contamination detection systems. I think we're ahead of the world on that one, and I think others will follow, and there'll be a lot more use of AI in it probably, but I think we're going to do really well out of that. And the capturing recyclable metals and plastic from the residual waste, which hopefully we won't have to do a lot of that in the future if we can get the sorting right. That's it from me. Thank you very much.